Hey, it's Colleen.
Hi, it's Kate.
And it's Megan.
And we're the
Three Scheme Queens. Join us as we discuss popular hoaxes and give you our comedic take on what is fact and what is fiction. If you have a sense of humor and an open mind, come take this journey with us.
We'll tell you what we think, and we'll try to prove it to you.
Is this thing on?
Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
It's the
Two Scheme Queens.
Scheme Queens today.
Where's our third?
Well, she's swimming with the dolphins.
Oh,
I know. Ew. On a cruise.
ew.
She's checking to see if they have opposable penises for us.
She's on a little birthday getaway.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
What were you doing 5 years ago, Megan? Do you know?
I do remember
Uh-huh.
I was at a bar for happy hour with my friend. We were sitting at the end of the bar, and the people next to us were talking about this wild virus
Yep.
that was coming, and they were like, I hear they're going to shut down the schools. And I was like, what are they talking about?
Yep.
And
Well-
that was the first I heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was on a group chat
Mhm.
with a couple of our friends, and one of them was like, Stephanie. She was like, this is really crazy what's going on in China. This virus is so crazy. And I had just listened to a podcast about the coronavirus, and I was like, it's no big deal. It's gonna be fine. It's like a cold. Flash forward. We were not fine.
We were not fine.
We were not fine.
And the course of everybody's lives, I would say, especially the healthcare.
Yes.
Because the way healthcare is run day to day
Yep.
completely changed.
100%.
Yeah, so who knew that was going to be a once in a lifetime, life altering event?
Yeah, I don't know. Who knew? Who could have known, Megan? I don't know. Maybe somebody could have known.
Okay, well, before we get into who could have known,
Okay.
is it time for our
Drink check.
Drink check.
last weekend? We had a little birthday dinner
Yeah.
for Colleen.
Yep.
Kate made a delicious pot roast.
It was so good.
So good.
Yeah.
And Kate had purchased these mini Corona bottles because Corona is Colleen's favorite beer.
They're like the perfect size for her.
Yes, it was like the perfect find for Colleen.
Right.
And we said,
It stays cold long enough for her to drink it. Yep.
Yes. And so we decided, there's 4 left in this pack. So we're drinking these as our drink check today.
Yes. A Corona.
For
We're going to be talking about
the coronavirus.
the novel coronavirus.
Yes, because there are a lot of coronaviruses.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's been like 70 outside. This is kind of nice and refreshing.
It's like a preview of summer, if you will.
Yeah.
It's like not quite hot enough.
Yeah, and I don't want to commit to like an IPA or real beer, so
Yeah.
it's like a watered down beer.
Yeah, but you got to have a lime in it.
Oh, for sure, these have limes in these.
Right.
I would never serve you
No.
Corona without a lime in it.
Right,
Kate.
exactly. It's like a Blue Moon has to have an orange.
Yeah,
A Corona has to have a lime.
correct.
And it's Corona Extra, to be clear.
Yeah,
We don't do no light shit, okay? Maybe Colleen. Right.
right.
Or Kate in college, Mike Ultra.
So these are fine, but you know what? They're appropriate for our theme. And I just know that if Colleen were here, she would be in heaven. So
Oh my gosh. This would be Colleen's favorite drink trick.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
Besides a Diet Coke.
all right.
Mini Diet Coke, though.
Yes, I now stock her because she can't finish the whole 12-ounce can.
Yeah.
So I have to stock her the little. Yeah.
Was it like an 8-ounce can? It's
Yeah.
tiny.
Yeah.
But it's the perfect size for her. Okay, so Megan, guys, I just want to preface, we are talking about COVID.
Mhm.
We've gone back and forth.
Mhm.
Do we do this? Do we not do this? I have been pushing to do COVID. And there's lots of conspiracy theories around COVID. I'm going to talk about where COVID began specifically.
Okay.
And we're not going to talk about like there's other conspiracies like the quote pandemic or like there's all these conspiracies around the vaccine and all of those things. We are not talking about those things. Those are way too controversial. You may have your opinion already about it. We also have ours. And those are things that we just don't we don't think should be spoken about on the podcast.
Yeah, I think we've said this in the past, but in case you just found us and it's like the first episode, we are healthcare providers. We lived through COVID. We saw people dying, people close to us who work in healthcare who are more in it, right? Like our colleagues, like in the medical ICUs, the nurses, the providers, the respiratory therapists. Obviously, a lot of people had family who died. It was like a horrific time, and so we have all the respect for those people. We believe COVID was real. We are not saying that the whole thing was fake. Again, we saw it, but yeah, I think a lot of lies being told to us.
Yeah.
Back then that are slowly coming out.
Right. So that's sort of like the story that we're telling this time. Like Megan said, we were healthcare workers. There is no doubt in our mind when they had to put up a second morgue outside of our hospital that COVID was a real thing. We are not talking about COVID as a hoax. That is absolutely false. We lived through it. We did it. It was terrible. Healthcare has not been the same since. So that's our disclaimer when we're talking about COVID. And we don't want to talk about any of the other conspiracies along with it. Whether or not you're vaxxed, whether or not you aren't, that's up to you. That's your decision. We have our opinions. So with that all said, let us begin.
Okay.
All right. So 2020 will be a year that lives in infamy for the rest of our generation. It is the year that workers were asked to stay home, children asked not to go to school. It is a year that healthcare workers were heroes, showing up to work in unprecedented times, fighting a virus that they didn't know how to fight. It is the year of don't wear a mask, don't worry, to wear a mask and wash your groceries, and oh my gosh, it could spread through your eyeballs. It was a pivotal election year. It was a year where protests and riots were rampant. It was the year of fear and hysteria and TikTok popping off. And all of that leads back to a little pesky virus named SARS-CoV-2, or as people know it, COVID-19. Where did this virus start? Is there still controversy over the origin story? What does the trail of money say? As you know, we like to
follow the money.
That's right. Follow the money here. And mostly, was the government just covering up a huge, colossal mistake? Let's travel back in time to revisit the story of COVID-19. And don't worry, no mask is required while listening to this podcast.
Nerd alert. So I have to be honest, I can't wait to hear what you're going to teach me here. I didn't really realize that it was like a big secret that this came from a lab. Okay. Like, I feel like all along I've been like, yeah, this was probably mishandled in the lab, much like Lyme disease, Plum Island. Okay. And I think we're finally seeing some investigations coming out proving that. Which I was like, oh, I didn't know this wasn't like an understood fact.
Right.
But that's about all I've got on the origin. So I can't wait for you to fill me
talk
deeper.
about it.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to walk you back through the timeline. And I'm going to tell you, when I was going through the timeline, this is from the CDC's website. I was in full on like fight or flight. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm reliving this. Like, it's just bringing back so many like vivid memories of that year, which is just a weird year. Like, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh.
I felt like that when all of the TV shows, like Grey's Anatomy, had like the COVID storyline. And I was like, oh my gosh, we walk out our doors and we live this. Like, not even help. Everyone walks out their doors and you're living this.
Right.
And like, I don't need to like check out on my couch with TV on.
No.
Relive it on TV.
I don't need to watch somebody gown up when I gowned up.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
Like, wild.
And in fact, you mentioned in your intro about like the protests and the violence and everything that kind of happened around this time. And I was living in DC and it was giving me straight up flashbacks to Afghanistan, to like a legitimate war zone that I was in. That's how DC felt. It was just like crowd dispersal, noise nonstop and yelling. And Anyway, and I was like, it's time for me to GTFO out of this city.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really what got me slightly more into the burbs.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us about it. And hopefully I won't be re-traumatized as
Oh
well.
my gosh. Okay, so December 12th, 2019, a handful of individuals started experiencing fever and atypical pneumonia that emerged in China. December 31st, 2019, China informs the WHO, World Health Organization, of several cases of severe acute pneumonia with unknown origin. Symptomology includes shortness of breath and fever. January 7th, 2020, scientists in China confirmed that the virus is a coronavirus. January 11th, 2020, China reports the first death due to SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 at this point is being called the novel coronavirus. That's sort of like what the media starts talking about. And it didn't actually come out as like COVID-19 until later. We started calling that. January 14th, 2020, the first laboratory test confirms SARS-CoV-2 outside of China in Thailand. January 15th, Japan confirms their first case. January 17th, CDC begins screening individuals who have traveled through Wuhan to America. So in LA, in San Francisco, New York City, which are the places that got hit pretty hard.
Yeah. When you're saying these are the first reported cases, do we think they were the first cases?
No.
Okay.
January 20th, 2020, the U.S. has now reported their first case of COVID-19. January 31st, a nationwide travel ban has been placed on all non-American citizens who have been in China within the last 14 days. Is this not like giving you, this is like, it's so triggering saying these things. February 11th, 2020, WHO announces the official name of the disease that's causing the 2019 novel coronavirus outbreak, which is COVID-19. March 11th, more than 118,000 cases in 114 countries and 4,291 deaths caused by COVID-19. And the WHO officially declares COVID-19 a pandemic. March 13th, the Trump administration declares a national emergency and issues a travel ban on 24 European countries and the first stay-at-home order for the next 2 weeks to try to get ahead of the spreading virus. So,
yeah, flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve. We are officially today recording this podcast 5 years from the first stay-at-home order.
So by the time you all are listening to this, 5 years ago today, you guys were locking down.
We were locking down.
And you know, I got to be honest that I think if it had just been 2 weeks, it could have been kind of nice.
Yeah.
Like I feel like right, we rediscovered Zoom. We were Zooming happy hours,
Yeah.
Zooming book clubs. We had we had like our little pods or buddies that we were, you know, quarantined with it. We were like, we can see this family and that's it.
Right.
Right. And yeah, but then it didn't just last 2 weeks.
No, and I remember in the hospital specifically, like there was a lot of like, okay, we're locked down. Yeah, all the elective cases were like canceled. They were basically saying, don't come to the hospital unless you really have to come to the hospital. And it was just crazy.
Well, and then I feel like when we were seeing the patients who did come in, even those who didn't have COVID, they were so much sicker.
Right.
Because they had been told to like avoid the ER.
And they weren't going to their doctors.
Yeah.
They weren't, yeah.
Yeah. And so they'd be like, well, I've been feeling lousy for a week, but I didn't want to get COVID.
Right.
So I didn't come in. And I also, in the midst of this little 2-week lockdown, yeah, all of my colleagues either got COVID. It was like before we hadn't even had patients yet, right? But all of my colleagues got it. I was the only one the Department of Health would allow to work. So that was super fun for me for that week.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had actually we always joke that one of our coworkers was like patient zero at our hospital.
She got it from the grocery store.
Yeah, there was like a right down the street, the Whole Foods.
And then they had to put our hospital on diversion, the staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just, it's again, I think everyone has like different experiences in the pandemic. And there's a lot of people that I talk to who are like, yeah, it was wild. My kids didn't go to school and my husband and I just had to stay at home and like work from home and we didn't see anyone for a year. And it's like, for honestly, like, I'm glad that I had to go to work because I didn't have to stay home. And like, I think that actually saved part of my sanity.
I agree. I think everything at work, again, was like twice as hard. But yes, I think I look back and I'm like, if I, living by myself, didn't have any social interaction, like work was my social interaction.
Right.
Otherwise, yeah, I'd have just been I would have gone crazy.
Right. Oh, and we have to tell the story about Colleen. I wish she was here so she could
Ugh.
tell it. So Colleen used to live with her aunt. You know this, right? Her aunt lived, 20 minutes from the hospital. Our coworker, again, this is the time where everyone was like so panicked. If you knew somebody who had an exposure, you were like staying home for 14 days because you weren't sure if you were going to get the virus. And so Colleen had an exposure from our coworker, and
She called her aunt on the way home.
her aunt kicked
said-
her out.
Oh, but I didn't even think, yeah, her aunt said, you better find somewhere else to stay.
Right.
So now she's in her car
Like,
trying to find somewhere else to stay.
right. Having a full-on mentee bee.
Yeah.
And she ended up in this like room that she rented in a house, and it's just,
She temporarily had to do her dishes in the
in the bathtub. Yeah. Daniel the German in the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so she has this whole story, but yeah, for the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, Colleen was homeless, trying to find a place.
Trying to take care of patients.
Healthcare heroes,
healthcare, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was our firfirst couple weeks. Just wild
But
times.
then it didn't end, huh?
No, it just kept going. And I remember 2020 being over and 2021, like New Year's Eve, and just being like, nothing's gonna change. It was just awful. Anyway, so Megan, what are your thoughts about Dr. Fauci? Let's talk about 2020 thoughts. What did you
Yeah.
think of 2020?
Okay, so 2020, I thought this man is a hero. I was just like, this guy is looking out for all of our health.
Yep.
He's such a smart guy. He works for the NIH. He's got decades of experience.
Right.
I didn't think, again, I don't think his thought of flatten the curve so the ERs don't get overwhelmed in these first 2 weeks was unreasonable. Yes, my 2020 opinion of him was very different from my opinion of him today.
Right. And I want to talk about the flatten the curve thing too, because there was all these like we didn't have the resources for a pandemic. So that was another thing. They wanted to get the manufacturing up and running, but even still, like when New York was like so overwhelmed, these patients that had breathing tubes had no sedation because there was just none. Or like these community hospitals. Our hospital was like, we never ran out of masks. Yes, we were given our one N95 and we're told, don't lose it. Here's your paper bag.
Yes, put it in a brown paper lunch bag and you just carry it around with you everywhere. And everyone had these like wrinkled up bags. Yeah.
Right.
And then like once a month you were allowed to trade it in for a fresh one.
Right, exactly. And then ours never actually got like, there were some hospitals that were like reusing theirs, like they would go through like UV light and then they were being reused, and like we got to throw ours out.
We never had trash bags.
Right, we never had trash bags.
Yeah, I think hearing people at other hospitals, I think as far
They
as
had to wear like cloth masks, and like
my mom was sewing the cloth
so
masks
was
for the
mine.
hospital.
Yes. So yeah, just like wild. So yeah, so the flatten the curve wasn't the first 2 weeks, not a bad idea. Let's give our healthcare workers time to get resources to get us to the place where we're actually prepared for this pandemic. And that's sort of like, but then it just kept going on and on, and the anxiety and the mental health, like, oh my gosh. Okay, so let me give you a little, so yeah, my thoughts on 2020 Fauci is just like, Dr. Fauci, I was like, he's my hero, like he's so smart, kind of like Megan said, like I can't believe anyone's like criticizing him, especially in 2021. There's a lot of criticism and like, oh, he's just getting his like 5 minutes of fame. And I'm just like, and I think as a healthcare worker, you were like really like personally taking offense to everything, because we were like in the trenches and like we went from 2020 healthcare heroes to 2021 healthcare zeros. And it was like everyone else was out living our lives and we were still in hell. That's how 2021 was in the hospital.
I don't know But people were really outliving their lives. But I will say that I know, like 2021 into 2022, when people started complaining that they had to go back to work and they were so terrified about getting the virus. And I was like, some of us have been in it for over a year.
Right.
And then to hear people being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're making me go back to the office where I could get COVID.
Right.
That was like,
And you're like, wait, I'm actually up in this patient's mucus.
yeah.
Like, yeah. So, okay, so let me tell you about Dr. Fauci. So, Dr. Anthony Fauci attended undergrad at the College of Holy Cross, and he attended medical school at Cornell University, where in 1966 he graduated with his medical degree in internal adult medicine, focusing on immunology and infectious disease. He served as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease from 1984 to 2002. In 2021, he was appointed chief medical advisor by President Joe Biden until he retired a year later. He has been cited in many medical and scientific journals, and in 2008, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George W. Bush for his work on the United States President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. This is also known as PEPFAR. And this program sort of helped helped add global funding for the HIV and AIDS epidemic, as well as offer help in preventing severe complications or death for those suffering from the disease. But we just kind of know him as like the pandemic guy.
The face of COVID.
Yeah.
That guy with the little guy with the Jersey accent.
Yeah.
Jersey or New York?
It's like a New York
Jersey,
City
yeah.
accent. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about where COVID came from. Okay. Let's talk about it. Do you remember what they started telling us at the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, I remember them saying it came from I do remember initially them saying it came from a wet market.
Right. So in the beginning, there was all this like news articles and everything like that it came from a wet market, which the wet market in China is like,
isn't it like a fish market?
it's like a market you can go and get like meat from. And it's like not regulated. Like this kind of stuff that comes from the wet market is like questionable at best, right? This is where you get cats.
Stop it. Are you serious?
Cat meat,
Oh my God.
dog meat.
What about the bats? Because the bats were a story at one point.
Well, that was the thing.
That came
They're
later?
telling everybody that the bats are where the COVID came from.
Wait, bats gave it to the animals in the wet market?
No,
No.
that somebody ate a bat.
Because they're eating cats. Why wouldn't they eat bats?
Right, because the first SARS, before there was COVID, there was SARS. SARS was like this it was an epidemic. It never became a pandemic, but it came basically from this like raccoon-looking animal. I don't know the actual name of it. I didn't write it down.
Oh, but no, I do remember this because is it a pangolin? Is that right?
Pangolin.
Hold on. Let me fact check that. Pangolin. The pangolin.
Yeah, it looks like a rabid cat raccoon.
It's like a raccoon that's scaly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So SARS basically was kind of like the same virus where it makes you it's a respiratory illness that basically makes you get pulmonary edema and basically suffocate and die. It's how COVID, people were dying from COVID. Not just pulmonary edema, but
Like
acute
a massive-
respiratory failure and all that acute respiratory
A massive
distress syndrome.
inflammatory
Yeah.
response. Yeah.
And so then there was MERS, and MERS was not in China, it was in the Middle East, and it was another coronavirus, and that had jumped from animal to human. And so anyway, but again, contained, did not spread like COVID spread. So that was like the first sort of thought. This is what they're telling the public. But let me let you in on this little secret.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce to you another player in the game, okay?
Okay.
Okay, this is Dr. Robert Redfield, and he is the director of the CDC at the time in 2020. He's an American virologist who served as the 18th director at the CDC and the administrator of Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry from 2018 to 2021. He attended Georgetown University.
Oh, woohoo, Georgetown.
Hoya Saxa, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he also worked in Columbia, at the Columbia University in New York City, labs where investigations focus on the involvement of retroviruses in human disease. So he earned both his bachelor and his doctorate at the School of Medicine in Georgetown. So we love it.
Yeah.
Anyway, he did his medical residency. We love this also at Walter Reed. Yeah, I know he's part of the Army. We love it. He did his internship in internal medicine And he became a U.S. Army officer. He completed his fellowship at Walter Reed in infectious disease and tropical medicine. So we can say that this guy sounds like he knows infectious diseases, right?
I'm kind of feeling like the head of the CDC, who's an expert in viruses. Why did we not see his face?
Exactly. Kind of weird, right?
Right.
Right. He also was in the US Army, he also worked for a decade in virology, immunology, and clinical research.
Okay, please tell me, what does this man have to say about COVID?
Yes. So this guy gets a call December 31st, 2019.
2019. Okay.
2019 from the CDC director in China, Dr. Gao. And the guy says, listen, Dr. Redfield, I've got 27 cases of this unspecified pneumonia, and I think it's coming from the wet market.
Okay.
So Dr. Gao says this to him. He's like, okay, that's weird. Hangs up the phone. Thinks it's strange. Follows pretty closely. A couple days later, he gets another phone call from this guy. Same guy, Dr. Gao. And he's like, now I have hundreds of cases of this atypical pneumonia that we don't know what's causing it. And I don't think it's actually coming from the wet markets.
So this is January.
This is January
Okay.
of 2020.
Okay.
Okay. So, head of the CDC, Dr. Redfield, gets off the phone, makes a call to the National Security Council. Second phone call he makes to Dr. Fauci. And he says to Dr. Fauci, he shares this concern, and this is the reason why Dr. Gao was saying, I don't think this is coming from the wet market because the virus is spreading so quickly. And like I said about MERS and SARS-1, it couldn't figure out how to transmit in between humans.
Yeah, I heard this. It takes a lot of time to change. Yes. So if it goes animal to animal or whatever, it takes a much longer time to adapt to then be able to infect humans.
Exactly, which is why they were so contained, because it really as long as you quarantine those people, it would die because it couldn't figure out how to jump from human to human. But COVID was too intelligent. So it started, yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah.
So he goes to Tony, Dr. Fauci, and he says, yo, Tony, I think we really need to look at this because this is really interesting. I think this could probably be a virus from the lab and we need to look into it.
From he knew Wuhan lab immediately?
No, I think he just knew that it was like bioengineered.
It's probably man-made.
Right.
Okay.
And Dr. Fauci, who is a man of science, who is quoted to have said, are you ready for it?
Oh, wait, this might be the line that triggers me. Is this the an attack on science is an attack on me?
Exactly.
Which I will say, the ego.
The ego.
Yes.
You guys can pull this up.
I think he says an attack on me is an attack on science, but he's somehow yeah, fact check me. What did he say?
Attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science.
Yeah.
Okay? Which to me, I'm sorry. You're equivalent.
You're equivalent?
Yeah, you're equivalent to science?
Yeah.
My guy.
I mean, that sound in retrospect now, it feels like a way to be. I mean, I feel like this was very politicized, right? But it feels like a way to be like, shut up and don't question me.
Right.
Because if you're questioning me, you're questioning science, and so
science is always right.
Yes, which we believe that we love science. Science
right.
is right.
Science is right, but you also should always question science, right?
Yes.
Because that's the whole point of research.
Yes, everything in science is questioned. We peer review everything.
Right.
Everything has to go through like a rigorous,
right, trials
and yeah.
So again, Dr. Redfield finds it interesting because Dr. Fauci just is like, no, it clearly can't be bioengineered. This is definitely coming from the wet market. And Dr. Redfield is like, hold on a second. You're a man of science, and it is weird, strange that you're only considering one hypothesis.
Yeah, you're not even questioning this.
Yeah, and you're not even considering all of the things that could actually happen. Okay. So, again, Dr. Redfield argues that this novel virus could actually have come from gain of function research.
Gain of function. This is taking me back to Plum Island.
Megan, what is gain of function?
So gain of function is when you take something that already
virus,
exists. Okay,
yeah.
you take a virus that already exists and you want to find a way to make it function in other ways.
Yep.
So we think about this a lot with like engineering bioweapons. And I think, again, we talked a lot about this in our Plum Island episode. I think the example we talked about with the gain of function then was like how we had the Borrelia bacteria and they were able to develop it into Lyme disease and inject it into ticks to make it a tick-borne illness that you could potentially use as warfare by
Right.
weapon. That's my understanding of gain of function is trying to take this virus that already exists, but manipulating it in a way to give it a different use. So that could be like a vaccine, like it could be for the benefit of people. It could be bioweapon,
Right.
whatever.
The Board of Life Sciences. No, that was a perfect way to explain it.
Okay.
I'm going to give you
Give me- yes,
yeah,
let's
I'll
hear
give
it.
you guys the definition. So, Board of Life Sciences in the potential risks and benefits of gain of function research, the summary of a workshop, they describe gain of function as, quote, routine virological methods involving experiments that aim to produce a gain of a desired function, such as a higher yields for vaccine strains, but often also lead to loss of function, such as loss of the ability for a virus to replicate well as a consequence. In other words, any selection process involving an alteration of genotypes and the resulting phenotypes is considered a type of gain of function research. Genotypes, for people who don't,
Who aren't science nerds like you.
who aren't science nerds, that is like how your gene expresses or your gene looks. So if you you can look at DNA and each of your DNA has like codes on
You have
it.
like a sequence of
Codes,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. And so that is like what we talk about when I talk about a genotype. We have genotypes as humans. Any type of organism has a specific genotype, right? And you can look at that genotype and kind of figure out where that gene is, what kind of organism that's coming from. And then phenotype, when we talk about phenotypes, that's how the genes express themselves. So that's like I have a gene for brown hair, therefore I have brown hair. That's like the basic of
Yeah, this is taking me back to AP Bio.
Yeah.
Maybe not even AP Bio, maybe like 8th grade Bio.
But when you're talking about a virus, let's talk very simply. The flu virus, the influenza virus. The influenza virus has a very specific genotype. When you get infected with the genotype, we know how the virus is going to work. We know the phenotype of how it's going to express itself. You're going to get body aches, fever, chills. This is something that we see, maybe cough, runny nose. This is classic flu symptoms, right? This is how we all, this is how we know what the flu looks like. So when you're talking about viruses, that's what you're talking about. There's a genotype of the virus and then how it expresses itself, aka the symptomology of the virus, and that would be your phenotype. Okay? Makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. So, and we do know that the government had been working with gain of function. Yeah, we can go back and listen to our Plum Island, right? Yeah, that was America. Yeah. You know who loves gain of function research?
Tony
the Tiger, Dr. Fauci, loves gain of function research. And Dr. Redfield, the head of the CDC, claims that Fauci believed that the best way to predict the next pandemic was by creating it. That sounds a little sinister, don't you think?
It gives me, again, the ego.
Exactly.
The ego to be like, okay, I get it. My goal is a positive thing. My goal is to try to let's create a virus so that we can prevent it from becoming a pandemic later. But like, I'm gonna have total control of this unknown virus.
Right.
I just
the God complex that you have to have.
Yes.
That like
the delusions of grandeur.
Exactly.
Grandiosity.
That I can create something that's so deadly, but if I create it, then I can control it. My guy, no, you can't. As evidenced by
the pandemic we experienced.
The pandemic. Okay. Let me give you another player.
Okay.
Dr. Richard E. Bright. Richard E. Bright is an American molecular biologist. He has nothing to do with the CDC. He was never in the CDC. He's just, quote, on the board of governors and the professor of chemistry and chemical biology at the Rutgers University. He also is the director of the Waxman Institute of Microbiology. Okay, so microbiology, they're studying diseases there. They're studying things on a micro level. And then he was also co-appointed the investigator of Howard Hughes Medical Institute from 1997 to 2013. So this guy's also pretty smart, right?
Say Howard Hughes,
That's
like the crazy billionaire.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
He basically said at the very beginning, so he's pretty much like, he and Tony Fauci basically don't like each other. They've never liked each other. Whereas Dr. Redfield and Tony worked together on their AIDS project. If you want to go back, like I said, George W. Bush awarded Tony Fauci on his like work with AIDS and funding AIDS and the research involved with it. Dr. Redfield and Dr. Fauci were like buddies. They were colleagues. They worked closely together. Dr. Ebright, not so much.
Okay.
Not a fan of Fauci from
Okay.
the very beginning.
Is he a fan of?
Redfield?
Yeah.
No beef there.
No beef with Redfield, but beef with Fauci.
Beef with Fauci.
Okay.
Because he's basically saying that, from the beginning, it is obvious that the virus was bioengineered and that it is crazy that we are going and that the public is being told that like it came from a bat and it jumped from animal to human and it's just so smart that it can replicate in humans. So again, he accuses Dr. Fauci for lying to the public and then also continuing to deny that there's been like gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So this is sort of like, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself, but I want you guys to know that these are like people that were coming out in the beginning that were saying like, this is not, this doesn't make sense.
From the start, we have other experts in this area.
Right.
Who are saying this was definitely made in a lab, manufactured somehow.
Exactly. Man-made,
or
manufactured.
man-altered, yes.
Right. Gain of function research, something like that.
How did Fauci just become like the face of COVID then?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked.
Okay.
I'm so glad you asked. There was a press conference where actually Dr. Redfield does speak to it or speak in it. And there is and he kind of like gives his spiel and then steps back and then someone from the media asks like, well, where do you think it came from? And Tony just steps up to the mic and starts talking about how it's jumped from animal to human. And then suddenly he becomes the face of the pandemic.
Wow.
And Dr. Redfield, talks about it later in one of his interviews. He says like, it's just, now I'm looking back on it and it just seems so weird. Like you would think that the director of the CDC should be answering these questions, but Dr. Fauci wasn't even, he was just, not just, I mean, it is a big deal to be the director of like the virologist and immunology in the NIH.
Yeah, was he like the highest paid government employee or something?
Right.
But yeah, I would think CDC.
Right.
That's our guy.
Exactly.
Okay.
I want to introduce another player, Christian Andersen.
Okay.
Christian Andersen is this Danish evolutionary biologist, and he works at the Department of Immunology and Microbiology at Scripps Research in La Jolla, California. Okay. He obtained his bachelor's in molecular biology at Aarhus University, and then he went and got his PhD in immunology at the University of Cambridge. So he worked pretty closely with Ebola during the Western African Ebola virus epidemic, which was in 2014. I don't know if you remember that. I remember that.
I do remember that because I was on the Ebola team.
Oh, yeah.
We had there was sort of like an old unit that wasn't really being used, and they converted it to like the Ebola unit, and they had a handful of healthcare workers who they were going to like volunteered to work this unit. And I think we got one patient who was a false alarm.
Right.
So yeah, but I do remember. But I do remember the panic around it, like that it's coming, and yeah.
I mean, I remember going through COVID and thinking about Ebola, and like I was like, I would still panic more about Ebola than COVID. Like I was just like Ebola's scary.
But like
'cause it
bleeding
can,
from every orifice is scary.
yeah, it kills you in like a week. But yeah, so I mean, I did a project on Ebola in 3rd grade, and I'll never forget. You like start with a sore throat, and I went to bed that night and I had a sore throat, and I was like, oh my gosh, do I have Ebola?
And then they should have started doing an SSRI.
Yeah, I was like, wait. So yeah, Ebola has been like traumatic for me ever since 3rd grade. So in 2014, when this like pandemic happened, and they were like, it could come to America, and then like we got all hospital trained for it, like because yeah, and there were like a couple cases.
We had
in
a couple.
America,
There was
yeah.
the nurse from Texas, right?
And she was transferred to NIH, yeah, and was treated. She was fine.
I think I did see there was some clip where Tony got all gowned up for a photo op with her or something.
Yeah, and he never took care of her.
Yeah.
He just brought a cameraman in there with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, real hero there.
Again, it's all the hindsight, you know?
Right. Also, Anderson did some work with Zika. Remember Zika?
Oh God.
But I do know that Zika, I was pregnant with Patch when Zika was happening, and it was like all this like, drama around it. And Berber Boy had to go to, I don't know, he was traveling a lot, and he went somewhere that was like a hot spot, and I was 30 weeks pregnant, and they were like, no sex until after the baby's born.
Also, I mean, at 30 weeks, the brain's mostly formed, right?
Yeah, but then
What's the deal? Isn't Zika like doesn't it give you little heads?
Yeah, it was giving you, what was it
Oh
called?
yeah, microencephalopathy.
Yeah, microencephalopathy. Yeah, I think you're right.
Microcephaly.
Yeah, microcephaly. I took that back to one of the infectious disease doctors at our hospital, and he was like, "Oh, this is really interesting question. Let me look this up for you." And so he did, and he got back to me, and he was like, "Yeah, wrap it up." So yeah, just Christian Anderson. Remember that name.
Okay.
So let's go back to January 11th, 2020.
Okay.
This is when China released SARS-CoV-2 as the genome for it. They actually had the sequence of the virus.
Okay.
And they were looking at the virus, and they're like, okay, this is really interesting. There's one part of the virus that actually stood out to them. And they were comparing it, before they came out of SARS-CoV-2, they identified the virus as a coronavirus.
Mhm.
And there are lots of different strands of coronaviruses. You guys can get coronaviruses, and it's just a cold.
Common cold.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny because I can't remember, this had nothing to do with my research, but it was theorized that the next pandemic would be a coronavirus before all of this happened. I don't know, I forget where I heard that, but it was the Spanish flu in 1914. So anyway, so someone had theorized this. So they're looking at it and they're comparing this genomic sequence to other coronaviruses, and they find this really interesting sequence, and the sequence is PRRA, and that's they figured out that this sequence was on, like, it's called a furin cleavage site, and this furin cleavage site was on one of the spikes. Coronaviruses, they are called coronaviruses because they have these spikes around them that look like a crown, corona crown. So these spikes actually like attach to, because you guys know that, well, I don't know if you know this, but a virus can't live without a host. So it attaches itself to a human cell or whatever, like a dog cell or whatever. And it dispenses its DNA into the cell, forces the cell to replicate, and then that's how it replicates in humans.
Yeah, and like the spikes or like the cleavage site you're talking about, that's what makes it so
infectious. Exactly.
So easily transmissible.
Right. So this is something that they're like, wait a second,
what's this doing here?
What is this right here? And at this point, like, all the virologists that are looking at this is like, okay, this is suspicious, and this definitely looks like it was put here on purpose.
Some human manipulation.
Exactly. Okay. Fast forward to February 1st, 2020. There's a conference call with the world's top scientist. Dr. Fauci calls it. But guess who's left out?
Our boy, Dr. Redfield?
Uh-huh.
Huh. The
director of CDC is left off the Zoom call.
Well, who's on the Zoom call?
Christian Anderson was on it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the scientists was Christian Anderson who was on it.
So, but it was a lot of bigwigs.
A lot of bigwigs.
So all the bigwigs except the biggest bigwig.
Except the biggest of wigs.
Yes.
The director of the CDC is not on the Zoom call.
What happened on the Zoom call?
Well, it's funny you ask that, Megan, because you know what? Not people don't really know what happened on the Zoom call, but they were able to pull up the chat.
Oh, okay.
And do you know what the chat said?
What did the chat say?
One of the guys on it said, "This is a big ask."
Okay.
Basically, let's see if we can do this. This is a big ask. We don't know what that big ask is.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, cover it up. Is that the big ask?
I don't know, because you know what? A week after this, floods of scientific papers come out
Oh my gosh.
saying that the novel coronavirus, definitely had nothing to do with a lab, and that it definitely came from bats.
So we have all these brilliant people saying we're looking at this genotype. This is definitely made in a lab. But now we have a big ask and a ton of papers saying no, it came from a bat.
And even better,
What would be their motivation?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question, Megan. I think we'll get to that later.
Okay, I'll hold my thought.
I'm gonna read to you some of these papers. Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, this isn't even a week after. February 3rd, 2020. A paper's published. A pneumonia outbreak associated with a new coronavirus of probable bat origin. Article states, quote, "Since the outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, 18 years ago, a large number of SARS-related coronaviruses have been discovered in their natural reservoir host, bats. Previous studies have shown that some bat SARS R-CoVS, which is not SARS-CoV-2, this is SARS-CoV-1, have the potential to infect humans." It then goes on to say, quote, "It appears that most of the early cases had contact history with original seafood market. However, the disease has not progressed to be transmitted by human to human contact, original SARS-CoV." And then it goes on to say that COVID-19 actually did come from an original seafood market or a wet market. And most importantly, strict regulations against the domestication and consumption of wildlife should be implemented. So that's the first article that comes out, saying let's regulate what's going on in these wet markets, which actually is not a bad.
No, I mean there should be some regulation, but this is before March. We haven't even locked down yet, and already we're getting propagandized. Okay,
March 17th, which is right after the lockdown. March 17th, 2020, Christian Anderson on the Zoom call appears in a medical journal article. Quote, "Although the evidence shows that SARS-CoV-2 is not a purposefully manipulated virus, it is currently impossible to prove or disprove the other theories of its origin described here. However, since we observed all notable SARS-CoV-2 features, including the optimized RBD and polybasic cleavage site in related coronaviruses in nature, we do not believe that any type of laboratory-based scenario is plausible." End quote.
Are these like letters to the editor, or these aren't like real studies?
These are real studies that I have linked with the whole DOI.
Oh my gosh. And they were like peer reviewed then.
Peer reviewed medical journals.
Okay.
And when you open them, the facts and figures are empty.
Oh my God. So even when they published these, they were like incomplete.
Exactly.
Sounds like opinion pieces maybe that they were like pushing off as.
Yes. And you want to talk about opinion pieces? That article came out March 17th, 2020. March 7th, so 10 days earlier, 2020, a Lancet article, which is a big
Lancet. Yeah, that's a big one.
Big medical journal. Quote, "The rapid, open, and transmitted sharing of data on this outbreak is now being threatened by rumors and misinformation around its origins. We stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin," end quote.
So they're just getting in front of it.
The
virus is not even here, and if you don't believe the party line, then you're just a crazy conspiracist.
Exactly.
Which is what people tell us all the time.
Right. Let's go back. Christian Anderson. He was actually consulted about a possible lab leak, and he exchanged some emails with Fauci in 2020, kind of like expressing like, we're like analyzing this virus genome and like, are we sure that this wasn't a lab leak? January 2020, this is part of the emails.
Oh, so before the papers came out.
Before the papers came
So
out.
he's questioning things before the papers even came out.
Right.
Okay.
This was February 1st. So Christian Anderson's talking to him in January 20, Dr. Fauci in 2020 is like, in an email, we need to investigate this further.
They have a Zoom call in February. In March, this guy who already was skeptical is putting out propaganda that this was definitely from the wet market.
Right. Exactly.
That is suspicious. What happened in that Zoom call to make him do a complete 180?
I don't know, except for the fact that it was a big ask, Megan.
It was okay. Yeah, that's wild. Okay.
Okay. So originally Christian Anderson's like, I don't know about this. Then, so when that like article comes out, it was the Lancet article comes out. There's this whole like press conference, and Dr. Fauci gets up, and he's like, like he basically says like it's an article was just published. I don't know the authors on this. I don't have the names of the authors to tell you. But like it went from animal to animal to human, and we know that for sure. This is the article and he's referencing this article. I'm sorry. You were on a phone call with all of the authors not even a month ago, and you're telling me you don't know the names of these authors?
Yeah, this seems like his fingers were all in this, and now he's trying to play it cool in his press conference. Like, oh, this great article just came out. I'll have to get it to you. I don't know who wrote it, but these are all the people in your little conspiracy circle.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Kind of weird, right? So this is what we're being told early in 2020. I remember this. It came from bats. They ate the bats. And this is anybody basically who's saying it's lab made is a conspiracy theorist. I remember this happening, and I remember like fighting and being like, this is crazy. This smart guy, Dr. Fauci, he knows what he's talking about. Like, why would you even question him? This is what's happened. It's like, but now I'm looking back and I'm like, yeah, how can it transmit?
I mean, I always thought, oh, this probably just came from a lab, but I guess I didn't realize the like intentional cover up that was happening.
Exactly.
Like, I just thought everyone was confused, and I was like, come on, let's be real. This probably just came from a lab. But this is so much more conspiratorial that like we have science, the face of science,
right,
conspire with all these other scientists to mislead the public,
right,
on
and
where it's
my
coming
question
from.
is like, why do you think they're misleading it, Megan?
Well, I want to know. I asked you.
Okay,
right. What is the motive for all of these bigwigs to risk their professional reputations?
Mm-hmm.
What is the motivation for Tony to lie to us? Tell me.
Okay, so 2014 Ebola outbreak. You know about this?
Yeah.
Okay, Ebola broke out in Western Africa in a place that it had never been seen before.
Okay,
so the Ebola virus is named after a river, because it was found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly known as Zaire. So it first outbroke in this river.
we're in Africa. These people go to the river to drink the water. The water has Ebola in it, so when they drink the river water, they get Ebola.
Right.
Okay.
And then Ebola just has this like terrible, basically it sends your body into DIC. You nausea, vomit, and then you basically you get septic, go into DIC, and then you
die from like bleeding from all your orifices.
Right. It's terrible. It's a terrible virus. Yeah. And a lot of it's because like in Africa, they don't have the nutrition like we do. They don't have the clean water. And so they can't, stay hydrated the way that we can. So really it's devastating because these Africans just don't have the resources that we do. And that's sort of how we treated Ebola here, is like we just, we supported their fluid and electrolyte balances, and as long as you support their fluid and electrolyte balance, they were able to get better. So 2014, but so where it originates in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, completely different place than where it popped up in 2014. In 2014, people are like saying to themselves, how did it get here? How did Ebola suddenly
pop up in the water?
Just suddenly pop up over here. And it was theorized that like there was gain of function research being done because they wanted to. I'm pretty sure it's like I understand that there's the vaccine for Ebola has been trying to be developed. That has been something the CDC has been and NIH have been working on. And part of the reason why people do, like I said, when I read you the
definition.
the definition of gain of function research, it is because we want to develop vaccines for these viruses.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
part of it is like it's research so that we can develop a vaccine, but also it can become dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's theorized that the Ebola, I mean, this is another whole other conspiracy that we could talk about, but basically it's theorized that gain of function research is the reason why there was this huge outbreak in this specific part of Africa, because it otherwise would have never been able to get to that point. And that was the whole thing about Ebola, is like Ebola pretty much stayed in this Ebola river and it lied dormant until it decided to come out again. So again, it was specific to this region in Africa. We know what else happened in 2014, Megan?
What?
The U.S. halted funding for gain of function research.
Because they knew that Ebola was from gain of function?
I mean, I'm sure it had something to do with that. They were probably like, oh, hold on a second.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Tony Fauci has been all over gain of function.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the fact that he loved gain of function. This is what he's been doing and studying his whole time at the NIH.
Okay.
Let me talk to you about. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. I just want you to have that little kernel of information in the back of your mind. 2014 Ebola outbreak.
No more gain of function.
No more gain of function.
Okay.
What do we know about the Wuhan Institute of Virology? What do you know about that, Megan?
I do know it's a level 4 lab.
Yes.
Which I only really know about because, again, our coverage of Plum Island, because the Plum Island in New York was like a level 3, I think. But when they moved to Kansas, it became a level 4. And I was like, this makes me so uncomfortable, because that means it's not animal to animal transmissible diseases. It's animal to human transmissible diseases.
Exactly.
And so the Wuhan Institute of Virology is also a level 4, correct?
Yes, but it didn't become a level 4. It opened in 1956.
Okay.
It didn't become a level 4 until 2017.
Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. In 2017, like you said, it became a level 4, where it basically was able to study
human
yeah, yeah. And the Wuhan Institute of Virology is most famous for researching coronaviruses.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Okay. 2018, it becomes a biosafety level 4. Okay.
Okay. A year before this corona outbreak, this coronavirus lab that is upgraded to a level 4 lab. It only takes a year for this freak outbreak to happen in the same city.
Mm-hmm.
But were they doing well, I guess, yeah, because only U.S. outlawed gain of function, right?
Mm-hmm. So gain of function in the U.S. becomes it's lifted in 2017. Okay, so 2017, gain of function's lifted. 2018, Wuhan lab opens. It's been open.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes leveled up to a level 4. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if you knew there was $1.1 million sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in 2018. It was part of it was sent during the Trump administration, and the USAID, who has been all over the news.
Stop. What about it?
They're the ones that sent $1.1 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
And what was that money to be
and
used
the
for?
funding went straight towards advancing researches on viruses that could pose a harm to human and animal health. Interesting, right?
Interesting.
Although it was never, quote, authorized for the funding of gain of function research. However, seems pretty interesting, right?
Right.
That all of a sudden, gain of function research is banned in America, This Wuhan lab is like chilling. And 2017, people start talking like, we're going to open up this.
You think
We're going to level up.
You think they're just outsourcing?
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly what happened. They outsourced the gain of function. They paid them to study the virus.
Wow.
There is a trail of money that shows that they paid them to study whatever it is they wanted to study.
This really does feel like Plum Island, 2.0, except on a much more fatal scale.
Mm-hmm. And then in 2019, the Trump administration stopped the USAID's work on this project. So this is just like a rough timeline. Like 2017, they start talking about like we're leveling up. Wuhan's leveling up to a level 4. 2018, they get $1.1 million. And then in 2019, Trump's like, no. We're not doing this anymore. And then all of a sudden,
We have an outbreak.
COVID that starts in Wuhan. And then in 2021, the Fauci emails become publicized. But the Fauci emails, completely redacted.
I'm so over the redactions.
Yes. I mean, all you can see is like, Dear Dr. Fauci. And then it's like, thank you. It's like black line. Thank you. And then whatever, whoever they're from. Christian Anderson. And like, these are the emails that we're getting. And we're like, wait a second. What?
Yeah.
What
are you hiding?
What are you hiding? They've since actually, like I said, they've actually now been discoverable to the public. Like they've been released to the public. And again, let's go back to Christian Anderson talking to Dr. Fauci in January about how he thought that this was actually a bioengineered virus. In 2024, we have the Fauci hearings where basically Fauci went before Congress and they discussed whether or not, he lied to the public, because all of this research is coming out that's actually saying, like, this actually didn't happen. Like this didn't like jump from a bat to a human and then suddenly become so smart that like it created a whole dang pandemic. And Fauci sat in front of Congress and basically said, like, there's clips of him going, I cannot recall. That's
what they all said.
I get a lot of emails in a day. I cannot recall. You guys can go look it up on YouTube. The amount of times he says, I cannot recall. He basically was in 2024. They basically like said like there's no evidence that supports that he knew anything about this. So 2024, the Fauci hearings, basically nothing comes from it, right? Congress basically says like we cannot confirm nor deny that there's any involvement of like lying to the public. But January 20th, 2025.
Ooh, sort of almost breaking news. Okay.
Biden's last day in office.
The pardon.
Pre-pardons Tony Fauci.
So I have mixed. Listen, I think that, again, the virus ended up being very politicized, as we talked about. And so I think that people would argue on the one hand that like Trump was coming in and he was such a bully and they were just trying to protect Fauci. But at the same time, a blanket pardon for your family and Tony.
And it's not even it's a pre-pardon.
Yes, it's like anything that is discovered in the future, he cannot be tried for.
Let's not forget, in 2021, he was appointed the chief medical advisor by President Joe Biden. He is appointed the guy. This is the guy that we are looking for all medical.
He is science.
Yep. Exactly. And then 2022, the year the emails are coming out, he retires and GTFOs. And then 2025, hours before Donald Trump becomes the 47th president of the United States of America, he pre-pardons Dr. Fauci. And he says, quote, the issuance of these pardons should not be mistaken as an acknowledgement that any individual engaged in any wrongdoing, nor should acceptance be misconstrued as an admission of guilt of any offense. Our nation owes their public servants a debt of gratitude for their tireless commitment to our country, end quote. So basically, he's like putting a disclaimer out there and saying, like, just because I pre-pardoned him doesn't mean that he actually did anything wrong. But, like, I'm sorry, a pre-pardon, my guy, he's guilty.
I was just curious while you were talking there about like if Fauci financially benefited from this pandemic, and shocker, he did.
Yeah.
Says prior to the pandemic, he was worth 7.6 million. Also, again, government employee worth $7.6 million.
Why?
I just of all the questions about all the government employees who are worth millions. You're like you make a couple. I mean, again, he's the highest paid. I think he makes like 400,000 or something.
Right.
But like,
why are you worth
these
millions?
Yes, these government employees who make 200,000 are senators,
Right.
but are valued at millions and millions
Nancy
of dollars.
Pelosi?
Yeah.
Girl, why?
So anyway, it says that his net by the end of 2021, he was worth $12.6 million. But within 2 years, he made $5 million.
Right.
Nearly doubled his net worth. So interesting that he was making some kind of financial benefit here.
That's super interesting. So I also want to like kind of fast forward to just like a couple days after the pre-pardoning.
Okay.
In 2025. This is from a CBS News article. Quote, the CIA now believes the virus responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic was most likely originated from a lab, according to assessment released Saturday that points the finger at China.
The CIA was investigating
The
this?
CIA investigated it and is saying that the virus is likely from a lab.
So let me ask you this. Was this the first time that we were officially told by anybody
Yeah.
that it could have been from a lab?
This is the first time it basically that anyone has said, like,
and it didn't happen till after the
5 years.
I know, and it didn't have to 5 years from that first email saying it's definitely, but then also this happened right after the pardon.
Exactly.
That's suspicious.
So suspicious.
Okay,
so also something that else was interesting enough, Megan, is that that little genome that I told you that made it stand out?
Yep.
What was it? The P.
Yeah, we talked. It was like related to the cleavage sites.
Yeah, the cleavage sites. PRRA. You know what else? Where else that is found?
Where?
The HIV virus. You know what the HIV virus can do? Lay dormant in the immune system and basically trick the immune system so it can't see it. You know how COVID-19 basically spread so fast? Because for 14 days, it lay dormant in our body, and we were the most infectious during that time where there was no symptoms.
So you think they used the HIV virus, they manipulated the HIV virus and inserted that into the COVID virus?
That's the theory.
Interesting. And Fauci was
an HIV guy.
An HIV guy.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, but here's the other thing you didn't touch on as you're wrapping up.
Okay.
What did he have over all those scientists in the Zoom call that would get them to risk their careers and lie about the origins of COVID?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Megan. All those guys on the Zoom call?
Yeah.
You know what they got?
What'd they get?
Money.
Follow the money.
That's right. They got funding personally signed by Dr. Fauci himself from the NIH to fund all of their little scientific projects.
That is so corrupt.
I'm thinking that's called bribery.
Yeah,
money.
I'm thinking these people are okay. So what? Now we have I don't know how many, maybe a dozen faces of science,
right?
That are all just lying to us about the science.
Does it not make you wonder what actually is right and what isn't right?
Yeah. What else have we been lied to about?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
All these medical journals that came out literally they didn't even study it and they were just like, it's from a bat.
Yeah.
And now 5 years later, we're actually being told like, no, actually it was bioengineered.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What I don't understand is why couldn't they just say that from the beginning?
Yeah.
I think Tony Fauci was trying to cover everything up for
A
himself.
100%. Everything you've said, this was a clear cover up.
Right.
And I feel like if you had just, again, because I just kind of thought, oh yeah, this definitely came from a lab, and it was like, that's what happened, and I went
Right.
about my day, but I didn't know it was such a big cover up, and that's what makes it so sketchy. Like if you just come out in the past and been like, oh my gosh, we were studying this
Right.
virus and somebody accidentally, because wasn't it like an employee, a worker who was
Yes,
one of the
he
first?
accidentally did it.
And it was like months before I think we even heard
Oh
about
my
it.
gosh. They were talking about how COVID was a thing in like October of 2019.
Yeah, because I think there was like the military games or something.
Yeah, yes.
And it was like, and that was in like the fall winter.
Way beginning of it. And they sent people from the freaking Wuhan lab to this place. And this is where the spread started. It was like Italy, France.
Yeah, everyone came home and brought the virus. with
Right,
them.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like Italy was like
Yeah.
wrecked by the
Yeah.
virus. Like
It was, the whole thing was an atrocity because again, the lives lost, the way, the impact this has had now on like
everything.
And I think, so you had mentioned the hearing, but wasn't there like an official, something came out officially from the government that said maybe you said the CIA, but yeah, I thought the government released like a press release. They did an investigation and they said like, yeah, this was definitely from a lab. It confirmed everything we've been saying.
Right.
And then we talked about the repercussions of everything we did, like the lockdown, the emotional and intelligence, and like all of the ramifications on our children who didn't go to school.
Right.
The loss of money from, unrelated to us treating the patients, but like the fraudulent claims. We lost like billions of dollars.
Yeah.
In unemployment, and people exploiting unemployment, and people exploiting like COVID tax relief. Yeah, it's just like are we ever going to come back from this? Not really.
Right. And one of the first studies just came out that like the lockdowns were actually not effective. There was no like, and it just shows that the stay-at-home order did more harm than good. Like you said, like the kids suffered. We have the American during COVID, the American Pediatric Association said it doesn't matter how much screen time your kids have, when before they were recommending only 2 hours.
But they have to Zoom.
Right. And so they're like, give them as much screen time as they want because you need to stay at home. And like all of these masks, the way they made us mask, the research didn't support the masks. The only research that was supported was the N95 masks. But like these masks that they had us running around outside on the grocery stores, like these little simple surgical masks or the cloth masks were a waste of time. When is the common sense going to take over?
Well, and I think also this has really led to a distrust. So I think as far as healthcare goes, the government report came out and said that this did lead to like worse healthcare for the general public, and like longer wait times and misdiagnoses. But I feel like it has also, the anxiety amongst patients is so much higher than it used to be, and there's so much more Dr. Google. Like everyone comes in and they're fighting you on your treatment because of Google, and I get it, because you're like, I don't really have faith in
medical providers anymore.
Yes, the medical providers, because you guys lied to us for 5 years.
Right.
And so now I'm just supposed to come in and believe what you tell me.
And it's really sad because like we are just like it's like the trickle down effect. It's like we really just are like the ones suffering from this pandemic, from like being lied to basically. And we're the ones like at the bedsides with the patients. We were at the bedsides in 2021, like watching people die from COVID. And then now we're at the bedside still in 2025 dealing with like the distrust. And like we aren't the ones, like we're being treated like we're the ones that conspired against the public, when really we were just doing the best we can. I mean, every day we're just doing the best we can. In 2020 and 2021 especially, doing the best we can. Like it just doesn't, and it like personally, it just like makes me angry to think that this guy who was the face of
don't question me, I'm the face of science, the face of the pandemic,
who just is walking free after like lives and money lost.
Well, he's enjoying his millions of dollars.
Right. And he got off. That's the thing. He got off.
Mm.
And now he's pardoned forever. It's just wild to me.
That is wild.
I've completely lost my respect for Dr. Fauci. I think this is going to make some people upset, but so yeah.
You know what? There was something interesting I read about how I think this goes into, I think we should cover anthrax in September. Because there was something interesting about how, I don't know if anyone remembers, but after 9/11, we had this like anthrax scare that people were getting mailed anthrax in envelopes. And it was all kind of fake, but I like Fauci got his job in that interim window when they're like, we have an anthrax outbreak. We need somebody to come in and lead things. And so he got this job, and then they're like, just kidding, anthrax wasn't even real.
Yeah, it was like basically a hoax.
Yes. And so like he got his whole job
based on a hoax.
Yeah. But I do think we probably need to cover anthrax at some point because that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, because anthrax was like a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it's like it was like quicksand. It was like, don't open the envelope.
Yeah.
Could be anthrax.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone could just mail something to your house.
Yeah.
So you and I agree.
Yeah. Dr. Fauci should be in jail.
Should be in jail. This was definitely from a lab, which again, I did not think was a big mystery, but the fact that there was such a cover up to prevent it, and the fact that we have, I mean, I am such a believer in science. Every day when I make my decisions at work, I reference the literature, right?
Yep.
And if people can just publish peer-reviewed literature that is all just propaganda,
right?
And like, what do I even have to believe in?
And that's I think that's like the most anchoring thought of this all is just like propaganda. And what was the point?
Yeah.
Was it all just to like
cover
Fauci up?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's just wild to me. And then like Dr. Redfield, he was unseated as the director of the CDC in 2021. Like they got rid of him.
What's he doing now?
Now he's treating patients with long COVID.
Wow, what a guy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was interesting. I'm sorry I fought you on it for so long. This was really interesting, though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry Colleen wasn't here to hear it. I would have loved her perspective.
I would have loved to hear her perspective because Colleen has such an interesting perspective.
She does.
Yeah.
We'd have been getting mad and she'd have been cracking jokes, too. She might have had a little levity for this.
Yeah, exactly. Or she would have just been, like, angry with us because, again, you guys all know we're all healthcare workers, and it just feels like it just is upsetting. Mm-hmm. When you were in it, you're elbow deep in the COVID bullshit, and you're still dealing with it. Yeah.
Guys, just a reminder, don't forget to check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at 3 Scheme Queens. That's the number 3 Scheme Queens, all one word. We're also on Reddit, same username. If you want to check out our website, go to 3schemequeens.com, and you can find links to our social media accounts, our Buzzsprout page, all of our episodes, additional content, our contact page, and our discussion board, where you can engage with us and share any updates on the topics that we have discussed. Let us know how we're doing and what you want to hear next. There are also opportunities to financially support us. There are links to buy us a cup of coffee, links to our recently updated merch store, and affiliate links. And as always, if you choose not to financially support us, we appreciate the follows, the downloads, listens, the likes. Kate, what should the people do?
Yeah. If you really enjoyed this episode, I want you to open up your phone and send it to 3 people that you actually think would really like this episode. Send it to 3 people that you like. No, you want them to follow the money, okay? And then scroll on down, leave us a 5-star review, leave us a comment, share us with your friends and family, share us on your fun group chat, and interact with us on our social media platforms, especially Instagram and our website and on Reddit. And Megan, where can the people find us next week?
Okay.
They can find us right here because we'll see you next
Tuesday.